Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming. Today's Wellness Committee sponsored didactic is entitled Night Shift Mastery Thriving as a Nocturnist by Setting Boundaries and Finding Balance. So, we have no disclosures to report, and we're going to do some brief introductions. My name is Vicki Zoe. I am from the University of Vermont, and I will be your moderator today.
I'm L.A. Alvarez. I'm at Stanford, Director of Wellbeing.
I'm Stephanie Koch. I'm the APD at UE Comp Emergency Medicine Residency in Peoria.
And I'm Mia Karamatsu, Pediatric Emergency Medicine at Stanford, and also Director of Wellbeing for our Pediatric Emergency Medicine Division.
And in true wellness fashion, I'm introducing Dr. Kyra Reed, who's done a lot of work, and we support her having a baby.
She's out on maternity leave. So today's learning objectives, today we're going to apply techniques to optimize scheduling and manage your clinical and academic workload effectively as a nocturnist or as an EM doc working many night shifts. We're going to identify the unique challenges that were faced by academic emergency medicine physicians who work primarily as nocturnists, including impacts on personal well-being, academic productivity, and work-life balance. And finally, we're going to go over strategies for setting boundaries between clinical, academic, and personal responsibilities to maintain your overall well-being and prevent burnout as an ER doctor. So I'm sure it's no surprise to you about the deleterious effects of shift work and especially sleep deprivation. This is sort of a landmark study that showed that fatigue back in the 90s can cause just as much impairment as alcohol use. And I know many of you have probably heard that study before. It's no surprise that EM nocturnists are super prone to sleep deprivation. And a survey of more than 800 ER doctors showed that actually 58% felt that shift work negatively influenced their job satisfaction. Almost 50% felt that night shifts caused them to think about leaving emergency medicine. And perhaps most alarmingly, among those who left emergency medicine entirely, more than 50% said that late evenings and night shifts were a major factor in their decision to leave. And this is really important because we need people to work these night shifts. We don't close the emergency room. We are 24/7 truly. So coming to our first objective, techniques for optimizing scheduling. How can nocturnists optimize their schedules in order to manage the workload of an academic EM physician? And I'm going to turn to our panelists in just a second, but think about fitting your night shift clinical schedule in with your academic responsibilities, and it's like an impossible game of Tetris sometimes. I know I feel that way. Some different places offer different scheduling preferences or incentives, and I'd like to ask our panelists what they get at their institutions for working a lot of nights or working all nights.
So I actually work 100% of the time on nights. So one of the benefits of being a nocturnalist at my institution is I get to set my own schedule, which is really helpful for my academic work. I also get a slight bonus for pay-wise for doing all nights. And so those are the ways that I can really incorporate my nights, essentially.
I'm also a 100% nocturnist in the adult ED. And so for us, in our department, we get 20% less clinical shifts. I think it's important to just highlight that oftentimes also in across the many institutions that we looked into, that means they also you get less paid because of you don't get the RVUs that you normally would. So it's a balance. I think it's important to recognize that some folks will have like time deduction. Some people will get like money given to them, and there's the hybrid unicorns that they get both.
Okay, and then for myself, I'm a pediatric emergency physician, so it's rare to find a nocturnist in pediatric emergency medicine. So I work approximately 25% of my shifts in doing nights. So I'm a 25% nocturnist. And so for me, in terms of scheduling, I just make sure I make my requests where I only work 3 max, shifts, in a row, just to make sure my circadian rhythm isn't thrown off too much. And then I make sure that I make sure my schedulers know that this is something very important to me.
I think the logistical implication of that is that for pediatric EM, because you don't have enough faculty, it's really hard to just have a sustainable nocturnist group. So in contrast for the adult ED for us, our faculty, there's on average they would do 1 to 2 overnights a year if they're a non-nocturnist.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing, everybody. So, we all know that there's challenges of night shifts in academia, but working nights is an integral part of our job. How do we balance the demands of night shifts with academic responsibilities? And these are just some of the many things that we balance on the academic side versus the night shift side. How do you overcome this impossible pendulum and find some balance with your academic workload and tasks?
So for myself, I make sure that I block out the time for important meetings, or if I'm going to teach or do simulation, I make sure I have it requested and blocked out in my calendar, and the schedulers know that there are certain dates or certain days of the week that I need time off, and I can't be scheduled for an overnight prior, so I can be at my best.
So I'm actually lucky because the main part of my role as APD is I do a lot of the scheduling for our residents. So the yearly schedule, I supervise our chiefs making the block to block schedule. So a lot of the work I can do on my own time, which means at night. So I stay on nights all the time, even when I'm not working. And so I'm able to do a lot of that work. It also gives me a lot of control over being able to set meetings at specific times. So I just tell them I'm not available after 10 a.m. and I wake up at 4, so they can schedule meetings then, but otherwise not. I do find it a little humorous that this lecture for Nocturnist was scheduled at 2 a.m. So, which, I mean, or 2 p.m. So 2 p.m. for the rest of the world. So I
feels
enjoyed
like
that
2 a.m.
quite a bit. I enjoyed that quite a bit, actually. So.
And then in terms of the circadian rhythm, in order, I mentioned this already, but I have my schedule, or I request my night shifts to be 3 in a row and no more than that. And then I also request a waterfall kind of schedule, meaning morning going into evening, going to night shifts. I don't want to flip from a night, and get off 7 in the morning, and then the next shift is 7 in the morning. So I make sure I clearly request not to have it scheduled that way.
So I never work the night before didactics. We always do didactics on Thursday. So then I try and sleep in a later Wednesday and stay up for my didactics till about 1:30 on Thursdays. Those are probably the most challenging. But then I just force myself to get up in the afternoon or evening around maybe 8 or 9. So I stay on my nights all the time. And so I think that helps me quite a bit. I also think that having a leadership position on nights can really be helpful for our residency and our residents. I think it offers a service to them that is really beneficial. Some emergency happens in the middle of the night, they feel they can, have somebody they can call and talk to. I've gone into the hospital and had meetings at 2 a.m. I've met with residents who are on their ICU rotations to talk through patients. And so I think it's been a real benefit to our residents to have someone on nights all the time.
Because I carry several hats, and I'm a nocturnist. I try to really make sure that I don't disrupt my circadian rhythm as much, and so I use anchor sleep a lot. I know I'm very productive after I take a 4-hour sleep after an overnight shift. So like 8 a.m. to noon, I usually sleep, and then from noon to 3, 4 o'clock, I'm very productive. Like homeworks, paperwork, finishing my paper, like that's when I do it. And then from 4 to 8 p.m. I sleep again, because then I get up at 8 to 9, get ready for work that starts around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. So that's my routine. Like every time I have meetings in between. Because I also I can control my schedule for the month, then I tend to struggle a lot for the first 2 weeks of the month, and then for the last 2 weeks of the month, I have a lot more breath to actually take care of myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, finding the time that you're most productive and able to do some of that deep work is going to be different if you're on a nocturnal schedule. For some people, it's normally when they wake up at 6 in the morning and their brain is fresh. But remember, that might be actually like 7, 8 at night right before you go into your shift. All right, our final objective for today, we're going to discuss strategies for setting boundaries. And I'd like to ask our panelists their own personal strategies for how they set boundaries between their personal, clinical, and academic responsibilities.
I tell people that I will be sleeping. I normalize that I will be sleeping during the daytime. And I mean, there are meetings that I cannot block out just because these are things that it takes a bunch of people to convene. And so I wake up for those, and I will struggle. My telomeres don't like me for those meetings. But for the most part, I really truly block my time. And if I do, believe it or not, you can ask like, hey, I'm working overnight. Can we move this to like, I don't know, 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.? And many people tend to be able to work that out. And also, I just practice a lot of self compassion. There's a ton of meetings that I just cannot make it. And actually, what's helpful is then all of a sudden, like, they don't really need me there. And so then that's also a good reason for me to find out later on that that is a meeting that I no longer need to attend in the future. So it's a good way for me to gauge like where am I really needed to be effective, and also like where am I needed to just be in the know, so that's for other work that I do, other hats that I carry, that I can still be effective asynchronously. In terms of blocking time, because I'm a nocturnist and also a nocturnist usually over the weekends, I tell everybody that I don't work on Mondays and Fridays. So in general, I don't work. I don't have meetings on Mondays and Fridays. So if you have meetings with me, that's a special case. And I only open my calendar from noon to 4 p.m. on Tuesdays to Thursdays. That allows me to have the important meetings that usually I cannot move in the morning, and also like that's when I'm the most productive mentally, and also allows me to sleep in the afternoon after 4 p.m. If I have shifts at night.
So I've discovered you don't actually have to tell everybody all the times you're available. So I think it's important to have some limitations. My admin staff wanted access to my calendar because the other APD and program director do that, and I did that for about maybe 1 to 2 weeks, and then like they got cut off right away because somehow I had a lot of meetings at 1 p.m. because I had huge chunks of time every day that was available. I didn't quite understand. So I think that's really important. I think setting boundaries with your residents, with your colleagues is also important. So I have a separate text tone for my residents and work colleagues so that if I've put my phone aside and I'm on my own time, I know who's trying to get a hold of me. I also block off vacation time. I try very hard to limit the access I give to the residents during when I'm on vacation. Somehow contacting your APD at 8 p.m. Makes you sort of feel very buddy-buddy, which I love. I appreciate how close I am with my residents, but at the same time, sometimes I think I'm too available to them. So actually saying, I need this time off, I'm gone, I'm on vacation, things you need to contact other people, I think is very important to help set those boundaries.
Okay, and then for myself, I have 3 children, and so a lot of my scheduling is around my family schedule. And so I make sure I have all of my family's schedule on my calendar, and I make sure I block out the time that I need to be there for my family and make sure my night shifts don't interfere with my time with my children. So that's very important because I don't want to be half awake at their spring performance and they see me sleeping while they're singing. That would not look good. And so I don't want that to be a core memory of them. And the other thing I want to mention is that I know I have colleagues that have actually been taken a nocturnist position because they're a mother and they want to be there during the time their children are, going to school and coming home from school. Personally, I did not take that route because know I am not a night person. I will not thrive. So personally, that's the reason why I'm not a nocturnist. But for some people, that fits for them, and I do have female colleagues who this fit their lifestyle.
I think it's important to recognize that what you're hearing, for the most part, are like one-offs. Like, this is what I do, this is what we do, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that what is important as well is to have like a departmental acknowledgement of the toll of overnight shifts on each and every one of us, right? So the Nocturnist team are actually helping support the rest of the department to be academically productive during the daytime, so that they can also, so that the rest of the team can work. So that recognition is important, and when we lose that, that's when you start seeing like the Nocturnist team like questioning like, do I really want this? My telomeres are not happy. I'm going to start doing some day shifts, which means that everybody else will start doing overnight shifts. So being clear with that, I think it's very helpful, and having initiatives that really tackle that. It's not an easy conversation, but it's a very important conversation to have. So I think that's important to acknowledge. The second one is that when we look into the impact of work on personal relationships, and also the circadian rhythm disruptions with our schedule as emergency physicians, it's often not because of the overnight shifts, right? You're hearing that like many programs will have some sort of a nocturnist group, or like you do like maybe like 25%. It's not nothing, it's significant, and it disrupts your time for the whole week. But most of us, including myself, are guilty of what we tend to do, which is, I have a shift tonight. I'm going to fill my day today with a bunch of meetings because I want my day off to be with my family or friends or whatever else priority that I want. What essentially then happens is that I show up to work tired, and then the next day you have like other responsibility because like your calendar just didn't all of a sudden get deleted, right? And so you not only did you work all day in on the previous day, then you work overnight or work the late PM shift. You get home by the time you finish your charting and get ready to sleep, it's like 4 a.m. And then you wake up the next morning with a bunch of other meetings. That, I think, has a significant impact of circadian rhythm disruption than the one-offs of overnight shifts that you do in a month. So I think it's important to also just acknowledge that, because when we look at it in our department, again, most faculty had like 1 to 2 or 3 overnight shifts a year, and sleep-related impairment was still like number 2 causes of burnout in our department. So we had to really look into that. And when we found out, it's actually because we care so much about all the other things that we care about, we sacrifice those personal times to just like bunch everything, work and academic non-clinical work together, which means we sleep less.
Thank you, everybody. I do want to leave some time for questions. We have about 4 minutes. I'm just curious, for the spread in the room, how many people are medical students? We got a few in the back.
Yay.
How many residents do we have? Ooh, we got a lot of residents. Fellows? One fellow attendings. All right, this is a great spread. I think this is really applicable as you think about faculty positions for residents, and then faculty if you think about incentivizing yourself to be a nocturnist, and how that might work out with your academic workload. But I'd be happy to entertain any questions that anybody might have.
I don't know if you guys talked about this in the first meeting.
So good.
But how do you start that conversation with the group about like, hey, I am working 14 night shifts, and you guys are working 1 or 2. Like,
Yeah.
I need something out of you guys. Is that conversation like directly to your chair, or?
You know, it's interesting. So for the first 7 years I was a nocturnist, we didn't actually get any benefit for doing nights in our group. We had a couple of docs who were lifelong nocturnists, and they had covered a lot, and so there was no incentive for the hospital to pay us anything or give us any benefit. And we started to push back a little bit more as we became a bigger group and picked on more hospitals. It became more obvious that they needed something for nocturnists, and it was challenging because I get called on a lot to do overtime. And I finally just had to start saying no, because I think there's a sense that we can help out the group, right? And I technically am off, and I am on nights all the time. And I know that my colleagues will be tired if they have to work this, and it will disrupt their lives. But it gets to a point where it's prioritizing and saying, my life is also important. I also think it's time that people acknowledge that I can't just work 50 hours of overtime all the time and not suffer for it. I'm just getting old is my problem.
I think, so the question is, how do you then bring this up? How do you have a conversation? I think creating a culture to have the conversation is important. So in our department, we have a monthly forum that we tackle things like this. So at one point we had, our call shifts were not paid for, and we only had a single call. And so we realized since the pandemic that like we have many other reasons to activate backup call. We stopped calling it sick call because like you don't need to be sick. It could be your kid who needs like time. You just need maybe like a day to I don't know, adjust your attitude because like it's been really rough. Whatever that is, we've actually developed. And so again, we had to form an honest conversation because there are things that happen in our lives that we also have to take care of beyond the clinical responsibilities. And so our department, after that conversation, it was very clear that it was an investment that we believed in as a group. So now we have a double backup system that we actually pay our faculty to do, which is a big shift from like before that it was not paid at all. And so just having a culture that you can have conversations like that facilitated, and it's not just you bringing it up and you're going to be in trouble. It's just like all of us can talk about this because again, because of you, the rest of the department is able to do really important academic work during the daytime. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We were out of time. Thanks for coming. And thank you to all of our panelists today.
And thank your Nocturnist people.
Thank you, Nocturnist. All right, sweet.
Yay.